Now it is. Great. Well, this is a real honor and pleasure to be among so many caring hearts and minds today, indoors on summer solstice and a full moon. That's quite auspicious. On this topic today, we're going to look at what and how can mindfulness address the problems that we're facing? What is the problem that mindfulness can contribute to? What is mindfulness? And how do we actually integrate mindfulness into our lives, both personally and professionally? And in that context, we want to look at also three divides: self from self, self from other, and self from nature. And in that overall overview, that gives you a little bit of a roadmap of how we're going to begin to address this. But rather than being in the abstract conceptual conversation about all this, we thought we wanted to give as much opportunity to have a direct experience of mindfulness. And I wanted to introduce our panelists, in addition to Sally, whom you know. Please refer to the bios for a more complete overview of who we are and what our background is and why we're even sitting here. But on my left is Susan Skjei. And Susan has an extensive background in corporate America with both Hewlett-Packard and storage tech and human development and leadership issues. And she's run for the last 20 years the Authentic Leadership Institute at Naropa University in Colorado. And Ed Bastian, unfortunately these are friends of mine, including Sally, for many, many years. So Ed Bastian also used to live in the Roaring Fork Valley. He's an author, filmmaker, PhD level Buddhist scholar, and runs the Spiritual Paths Foundation, which gives people direct experiences of spirit and the great mystery, which is also some of my work with Deep Nature Journeys, taking people in to meet with spirit and nature and themselves in the wild. So with that, we thought Susan could begin with a little bit of assistance to bring us fully here in our wholeness and guide us on a little bit of a mindfulness meditation.
Thanks, Bud. Good morning, everyone. So, the university that I teach at, Naropa University, is in Boulder. It's about 40 years old, and it was founded on the premise that if we could bring all of who we are to our educational journey, we might actually learn something. So, from the very beginning, mindfulness has been a part of what we do, and it's embedded in every single course, every single meeting that we have. We take a few moments of mindfulness at the beginning. And so it's very much just embedded into everything that we do. And certainly with the work that I do with leaders, it's essential. We need to be present before we can do anything. And often we're not. We've got our mind somewhere, our heart is somewhere else, perhaps in a little bit of a turmoil, and then our body is, doing something else. And of course, that's when accidents happen. That's when when things really go haywire. And you could almost say that planetarily, we're a little bit off kilter. We've got our mind somewhere, our heart somewhere else, and our body is somewhere else. So how can we actually bring these things together and align ourselves before anything else? So that's my invitation to you this morning, is not to do anything special, but just to do what we humans have always done when we're in a moment that's very important and we're about to embark on something meaningful, is we pause and we take a moment to be here. So how can we do that in the most simple way? I would recommend, don't change your posture, don't do anything different right now. Just simply bring awareness to what it is that you're doing. And maybe just starting with the body, noticing, where are my feet? Maybe your legs are crossed, maybe your feet are on the floor, it doesn't matter. The power of awareness, just bringing that to this moment, bringing that awareness to your legs, to that pressure of your seat on the chair, noticing your torso, noticing the spine, that amazing spine that's both upright but very flexible, and the heart area, the front of our body, which is so vulnerable. As human beings, we have this amazing combination of strength and vulnerability. Can we just rest with that for a moment? Now bringing awareness to the face. So many of our sense perceptions are here. Our sight, smell, taste, hearing. And now bringing awareness to the heart. And just noticing, how am I today? How am I coming into this new environment with all of my peers and colleagues and many people I don't know? How am I with that? How am I with this amazing endeavor that we're trying so hard to bring awareness to? Not just for ourselves, but for the entire planet. How am I with holding that big purpose? And noticing our minds. What's happening at the thought level? Am I able to be present? Is my mind wandering? It's okay. Just noticing that wandering, bringing it back again and again. Bringing the mind back and resting the mind on the body experience.
You know, in 30 minutes to cover the topic that is nature, wisdom, mindfulness, and a sustainable future, the only solution with all of our combined experiences is to apparently talk very, very slowly. And with that, I thought I would ask each of us, how do we connect the dots between our personal inquiry into contemplative practice and a deep journey that Ed, for example, has been on, and we've all been on. Many of you, I'm sure, have some sort of contemplative practice already. Might be a nice show of hands how many in the audience actually do on a regular basis a mindfulness practice. So a good number of you, which is really very, very powerful and wonderful. And Ed, in your case, you know, you've spent so many years with a deep dive into the inquiry of contemplative practices and spiritual awareness. And how do you cultivate and integrate by connecting the dots to your extraordinary professional life and your personal life? How do you actually connect those dots?
Well, thanks. But that's the question, isn't it? I think the first challenge we have is to try to recognize the problem that we're dealing with. What is sort of the root problem, the grounding? Sally, I think you alluded to that earlier, is that somehow today we've become so enamored with the external world that we think that our satisfaction, our health, and our happiness comes from things that are outside of us. And so that desire that we have drives the kind of economy that we have. The desire for more and more things to surround ourselves with leads us to want more, and we can never seem to have enough. So what do we do about that? So in the olden days, in classical days, there was a recognition, and it's emerging again today, that we need to return to an inner sense of peace, of equanimity, of satisfaction, of deep compassion. And now this whole movement that we're looking at today is called mindfulness. To be mindful of the situation that we're dealing with this incessant desire for more and more things to make us happy, that we might be able to return to something which is more centered, that is more internal, that has to do with our relationships with each other, our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with nature. And we begin here. As it's been said many times, that be the change that you wish to see in the world. So mindfulness really is an opportunity for us to be able to be that change. And so over the years, like many of us, years ago I did my doctorate in Buddhism and worked at being a Buddhist practitioner for 40 plus years. But I found the issue, as Bud and Sally have said, is how do we connect the dots, how we bring it into the world. And so I find that it's important to integrate a contemplative practice from whatever tradition you come, whether it's Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Native American or all the wonderful variety of traditions that we have in the world. They all have something, even if they don't name it mindfulness, they all have something that is this mindfulness practice. How do we still our mind? How do we become more focused? How do we become more wise? And how do we then lead into each day from that internal sense of well-being? So I find, Bud, that the important thing is that we begin by cultivating a practice, finding a practice that works for us as individuals, whether we are kinesthetic, doing yoga, tai chi, whether we're nature-oriented, being in nature, whether we're intellectually oriented, whether we are relationship-oriented, doing good work in the world, that we find that practice that centers us. And every day, the first thing that we do before we do anything else is to remind ourselves of that and to settle ourselves to move from our dream state before we get active, to remind ourselves of our values, set our intentions for the day, find ourselves in a mindful place, and then make a vow to ourselves that we're going to bring this into every relationship, everything that we do during the day. And we have, luckily, a marvelous variety of contemplative practices available to us today. So it's a great search. Find the one that works for you. And just bring it into the world. Connect the dots. Be the change. Experience the interbeingness, the relationship, the compassion that's available to us when we are in a mindfulness state of being.
Thank you, Ed.
One way to speak about the problem is to go back to the three divides. So Otto Scharmer out of MIT is someone that I've studied with quite a bit, and he's really identified these three areas. The separation from nature, which is exemplified by the fact that we're living on our planet as if it were 1.5 times bigger than it is. We're consuming our resources at that rate. And then with the divide between people, we can just look at the economic divide and looking at the 2.5 billion people that are living on $2 a day. And the 1% versus the 99% and how much that is becoming even more extreme. And then when it comes to the self on self, one measure of that is from the year 2000, the suicide rate was twice the rate of people dying in wars. And just that disconnect from self, that we would want to, or even think that that was an option to destroy our own lives. So just to really name the problem. And so how can mindfulness help with that? Connecting ourselves yet again with these three areas.
And we've talked a little bit, I loved the fact that Ed kept gesturing from here, from here, from here. It reminded me of another wonderful gesture that we might practice each day and as a way of reminding ourselves, and that is that often in both the Taoist and Buddhist traditions in Asia, there's a gesture where they say body, speech, mind, and they gesture to the heart. And so it's almost an irony or a paradox that we're talking about mindfulness, and really the goal that I see in mindfulness is quieting the mind in order to open the heart and our wholeness and the intelligence of the heart. So that's a way of reminding ourselves just with a gesture here. It would be a very powerful practice each morning. And I know that Sally wanted to share a story, and we've got about her own relationship with mindfulness. So, and my task as the moderator, of course, is to be the harsh taskmaster of the tyranny of time. So I might
Why are you
nudge
saying
Sally.
that right before me?
I have known you because you were wonderfully eloquent and articulate for a long time.
Well, I think what I want to say is opening the heart intelligence is really our original knowing. And that has been overburdened with this mesmerization that we have with the external world. When I was 7 years old, I've only told this story once in public, so I think there's a couple people here who might have heard it. But when I was 7 years old, I was sitting in Bible school, and we had our little Bible books open, and we were doing Samson and Delilah. And I looked at it, I was listening to the teacher, there was a semicircle of children. I slammed my book closed, I stood up, and I said, "This is not the truth, and I can't stay here anymore, and I'm never coming back." And I walked out, and I'm tromping. It was a big lawn area, and we lived on the same side of the street at the church, and I was booking it home, I'll tell you. I was scared to death. And I remember my little chiffon yellow dress and my little patent leather shoes, etc. And I heard they went and got my mother out of the congregation. And I heard her coming behind me, and she said, "Sally, stop." And I just froze. And she stooped down, turned me around, put her hands on my shoulders, and she looked at me and she said, "I understand you called the Bible school teacher a liar?" "Yeah." "And I understand you never want to go back?" "Yeah." And she looked me straight in the eyes and she said, "Where would you rather be?" And out of the mouths of babes, I said, "With God." And she said, "Where would that be?" And I said, "Over there." And across the road was a field with these magnificent old trees and a creek and butterflies and birds, and I'd sit in the sand and I'd watch the bugs and the worms make patterns in the sand. And when everybody else was in church, I was in God's cathedral. And so what I did one day, I had a particular affinity with trees, and this gets into the mindfulness. I sat with this tree for days, and one day it just hit me. I want to be the tree because I am the tree, and the tree is me. I sat with my back like this against the tree, and I closed my eyes, and that was my attention, mindfulness, mind emptiness, mindfulness. And that was where I wanted to focus. And I could feel the sap in the cambium of that tree in my spine. There was no differentiation between the frequency and the molecules of that tree and me. And then I crawled into her roots. She had these big roots. And I lay down like this. And I put my ear against her skin, and I wanted to hear her grow. Because I knew if I was still enough, I could. So out of that experience, I realized that I am it. We can't talk about mindfulness as something separate from us. I am it. I was born in the womb of creation with every single other thing, everything that has manifest and everything that has not yet manifest. I am that. Also, I realized that there is a master creative force, and Ed talked about this. The master creative force of the universe is love. And then I had the opportunity to write the foreword to a book called The Trust Frequency, and it's at our bookstore. And the authors, Connie Baxter Marlowe is here, and her partner, Andrew Bailey, have done some extraordinary work on mindfulness and consciousness. And I'm just going to stop here. One of the things that this session was about is how interconnected we are. And Connie told me once, she said, we are hopelessly, profoundly interconnected. So we need to understand that in the lexicon of every day. So there are assumptions about the phenomenon excuse me, not assumptions. The phenomenon of consciousness and mindfulness, which expands our consciousness, they have delineated into 7 qualities, if you will. Awareness, assumption, attitude, attention, alignment, action, and allowing.
Excellent. An excellent summary. And do seek out that book. I was able to help with some of the editing as well, and it's really got some terrific ideas. So I guess when you were with that tree at the age of 7, I was lost in the Jewel Basin primitive area of the Montana Rockies at the age of 7 in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and that was a profound transmission directly from the original Church of Earth. And I guess if you look at that image on your screen just for a moment and realize that there are you talked about the 3 A's, the wonderful support team you've got. There's this perception of separation that we embody as human beings, combined with an attitude of superiority from everything non-human in both the seen and the unseen realms. And it's our task, I think, in this life, in our human form, to transcend those two, that perception of separation and an attitude of superiority. And by opening our hearts and quieting our thinking mind to move into the observing mind through mindfulness practices and contemplative awareness, we really arrive at a much deeper level of skillful means, skillful approach to the solving of these many, many challenges that we're facing. So I guess in that context, we could segue quickly in the few minutes that we have remaining into Susan sharing just a little bit about her perception of what's the problem and how does this self relationship with self, how do we address that? And then a little practice on that as well. So, and I know we wanted to leave some time.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So I guess we'll just, we're going to be available, at least I will, for a day or two, and before we close, I'll have another invitation for you. But let's give these minutes to Ed to kind of guide us through a practice as well. Thank you.
Well, so let's just comfortably align our bodies, and although it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, but through the soles of our feet, let's just feel the energy of the earth and just being here present now with each other. And let's be grateful. We replace pessimism and doubt with gratitude for this extraordinary opportunity that we have to be together. Just contemplate a moment your gratitude. Grateful for the opportunity to be together and the great teachings that we've all learned in our lives. Grateful to the earth for providing us with a life. And may this time together be a transformative one for us. May we all learn something from each other through our relationships with each other and through the information that we're exchanging with each other. May this become a transformative energy to fuel our work. To do well, to do good. To help heal ourselves and to heal the planet. And may we breathe and return to our breath mindfully in moments of stress, in moments of doubt, moments of anger, moments of anxiety. Return to the great gift of breath, our constant companion, we take for granted. And feel the breath as it goes from the tip of your nostrils, and follow that breath as it goes deep into your lungs and resting in your heart center. Feel how your body relaxes, your mind relaxes. And may through this practice, simply returning to our breath, may we become wise. May that wisdom that resides deep within the center of all of us, that wisdom of the inextricable interdependence in which we are all part, that wisdom that knows that the well-being of ourselves is dependent on the well-being of all others, of the planet, of nature. And may we now enter into this time together with this intention that all that we learn here can help us to be of greater service through our professions and our personal lives and our relationships, to be in service to all. Thank you.